Can everybody hear me? Do I need the microphone? I'll try to use it. Hello? Is this better? Yeah? OK, perfect. Then I'll use it. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on our last session of the DataFest. This is the 10th, so the last one of 10 sessions. I'm very happy to have you all here. Some of the presenters are here, so I'm very happy to have you here. We're going to start with the closing ceremony, which is actually going to be Enrico. So he's the Vice Dean of the Erasmus School of Economics, Professor Enrico Pennings. And then he's going to give us a short speech about open data and why are we pushing for open science. And then we will have Dr. Mark Hahnel, which is the founder of Figshare. Figshare is the platform that we use in the Erasmus Data Repository, and we have socks now as well, so it can keep us warm. We're going to use the socks we have a small game at the end, so the winner of the game or the winners can get some socks. You also have cups of Figshare that we also got from Figshare, so please take them. So I'll give the floor now to Enrico for the introduction, and I will see you in a little bit.
Do you use a mic?
I think so. I think people at the back might not hear you.
All right, no problem. Thank you very much. I'm happy to say some words here at the closing event of this October DataFest. I think it was a big success. We had about, I think, almost 200 registrations, right, for all the events that we organized. I think there was a big push for open science. I think we have seen many different events, and they contributed really to the knowledge about open science. And I think that also will mean that we will be more using open science in the coming period. So I think that is very good. So we also had views on YouTube. So apart from these, say, about 200 registrations for the events that we had, we also had the YouTube viewers. So if you add that, then we get enormous reach of this event. So I think, Liz, you deserve a big applause for everything that you did. Right, so today I want to also tell a little bit about my own experiences with Figshare. So the topic of today is Figshare, as you know. So Figshare is integrated into the Erasmus Data Repository. So with some colleagues, I started doing some research on coaches of soccer. So these are coaches of national teams. And these coaches are foreign and they bring knowledge to these national teams. So they transfer knowledge from, say, the advanced soccer countries to lower ranked countries. So we can expect, for example, now with Dick Advocaat coaching the Iraqi team, that the Iraqi team will perform much better. So that is what we investigated, and we found indeed these results. But they were moderated in the sense that if the cultural distance was high, then it meant that a negative moderating impacts here on this positive relationship between knowledge transfer and the performance of these national teams. So I'm of course not here to explain papers or to motivate you to read the paper, but the thing was that we published actually the data and the code on Figshare. And I checked this morning, and there were more than 1,300 downloads of the code, of this data code, and of the data that we posted. So this means that every download also means that people are using it, and they may cite this work in the future when they're actually using the data and, say, building on what we did. So I think that gives an enormous boost for our research, and I think that is a very big motivation actually for you to use Figshare in the Erasmus Data Repository. So of course, if you publish this data, you have to be careful in the sense that there may be privacy issues. And we have, of course, here our privacy officer of ESE. And so what he recommended was actually not to publish the birth dates of these coaches, right? Because it can be personal privacy concerns about the data, and there are also here the options here also to not disclose all the data, but remain parts on private. So I think that is also a possibility. So don't refrain from using it because you think there are privacy issues. There are ways here that you can work around it and actually publish the data that you can actually share, and then you can also say that we have the data, we have also other data, but we keep those data private. So I think that is also a very good possibility here in Figshare. Okay, so we are here on, say, a day before All Souls Day. I think Dia de los Muertos in Mexico, right? So I think it's good to bury some of the past traditions or habits that we may have, to keep the data to ourselves. And I think it's a good moment to embrace open science and to share data, because we have here everything in place. We have here the tools, and we have invested in these tools and make use of these tools. I think that's my main message here. So today, I mean, who can better explain Figshare than the CEO and founder of Figshare? So we have Mark here. So I'm very happy to introduce Mark to you. So Mark has a PhD, so I think you build it at Figshare when you're completing your PhD in biology, right? So now I need to have a short letter to say some more things about you. Okay, Mark. Mark sits on the board of DataCite and the advisory board for the Directory of Open Access Journals. He was also on the judging panel for the National Institute of Health, the Wellcome Trust Open Science Prize, and acted as an advisor for the Springer Nature Masterclasses. So I'm very honored and pleased to give you the floor, Mark, and to tell us all about the ins and outs of Figshare.
Perfect. Can everybody hear me? Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, Enrico. That was great to hear. And data about football managers as well. Like the middle of the Venn diagram of my life is data and football at the moment. Great. Well, I'll be talking for about 20 minutes. Hopefully, I can keep the attention for that long, and not everybody hasn't moved into this world where our attention spans is about 5 minutes now, as mine tends to be. I can't wait for a bus without looking at my phone. But I think if we're framing this talk, and thank you very much for having me here to talk at the closing of this event, I think the idea that this event has been happening is really a huge statement about how the space has moved. And so if I think about the future of open data, you always have to look back to see what's going to model the future. And this is a really interesting just look at the last, well, it's 700 years of what's going on. But, you know, if you look at the philosophical transactions of the Royal Society, they first came out in 1665, 350 plus years ago. If you had a 10-page document on the research you were doing, you sent it in and they sent it to everybody else. And that's pretty much what Springer Nature, Elsevier, Wiley are still doing today, right? So it's obviously a great system that worked. But I'd also caveat that with there's been other advances, you know, the internet, that can move things along. And for those who don't know, the internet was founded for sharing academic data. So there is a good leap to it as to understand how fast things are ramping up. And even some of the innovations on this list at the bottom here, you know, Public Library of Science in 2003, and open access publishing, gold open access publishing has been a huge change to the way in which universities are working. But if we look at what can be achieved in a decade of academic publishing, or what can be achieved in a decade of repository land, which is where I feel I live, you might say, well, in 350 years, there hasn't been huge change, so what's going to happen in a decade? And it just so happens that Figshare is 10 years old just about now. So I have 10 years of data to look at. And when, as Enrico mentioned, when I was finishing my PhD, I was looking to publish papers and publish the data sets that went with them, or the videos of stem cells moving from one side of the screen to the other. And I'd send them into the publishers and they say, oh, this file's too big. It's 5 megabytes, which is tiny. And he's like, well, you know, do I put it on YouTube? You know, there's hundreds of places to make this stuff available. So How can academic publishing not keep up? And my incentives for doing that were, I wanted to get a better job. I wanted to turn up for a postdoc interview and say, yeah, I don't have many, I've got my 3 papers, and so this other person who's applying might have their 3 papers, but I've also had all this other impact with all of my other stuff because I was generating so much stuff. So if we're looking forward about what can be achieved in a decade in repository land, this is what was happening as I was starting to think about it. This is 2009. I know it's not exactly a decade. I'm just going to put my phone there so I don't get lost of time. If anybody wants to stop me because I'm running over, please let me know. Just shout. We're all friends here. And so this is a book by Microsoft Academic Research called The Fourth Paradigm. It's based on the work of a guy called Jim Gray, who was a data scientist who sadly went missing on a boat just before this came out. But he had these grand visions about why making content open is important, not just for my own impact reasons, which is where I was, but more for the good of humanity. And I know that's a big leap, but you know, academic publishing works, right? We get new drugs. We got a COVID vaccine pretty fast. So the fourth paradigm is referencing, we've gone through empirical evidence, the sky is blue, scientific theory, the sky is blue every day, computational science, which is, you know, get the computers to run the data for me based on my ideas. And then the next one is, well, if all of the data's out there and we've got machine learning and AI, at what point are the machines going to do the work for us? I don't think anyone thinks that humans are not going to be involved in any way. No one's job is at risk. But, you know, the promises of AI could really move things along. And Jim Gray said, implicit in the idea of a fourth paradigm is the ability and the need to share data. So 2009, this wasn't happening. There was nowhere to publish data. There was a few data publishing journals. There's a few societies that have been running for 50 years, and you could store your data somewhere. But if, like me, I was an academic trying to make my data available, I keep hitting my microphone again like that. And if you were like me trying to make your data available, there was nowhere to do it. So that's why Figshare existed, because I had to find somewhere for my own data to live. And so if we look about this idea of putting everything openly available, this is one of the 3 slides he did in his last talk, which is you have the literature, you have the derived and recombined data, and then you have the raw data. And he's saying, if you have all of that available to everyone, then you have no problem. We can build on top of the research that's gone before us and move further, faster in academic data. And it's a lot of times you can think about drug discovery, but it really works for all fields of just moving faster with academia, whether it's humanities or anything else. And this idea that at the start of around 2010, you have all these different labs, and I've presented a version of this slide for 10 years, and you can see how it works very well for the COVID vaccine, right? Is you've got 3 different labs, and they're all building on the same project, and in order to build on top of the work that's gone before, they just have to take the data or the papers from the different labs and build on top of it. But I'm sure we're all familiar with the phrase, you know, data available upon reasonable request, and reasonable can mean anything. So all it takes to stop, there's a little timeline at the bottom there, all it takes to break one of those things in 2010 and not move further faster is somebody to not reply to an email. It doesn't even have to be active, it can be passive. And then this axis extends out, and the cure for the COVID vaccine, for example, takes longer to happen, right? And that is where we were in 2010. So Jim Gray's grand vision of how can we move things forward, it's nicely timed, as I feel we have the first absolutely monumental breakthrough on that level, which is DeepMind, the Google-owned product, created something called AlphaFold. And it's basically, for every protein structure, you have to do crystallography. It costs a lot of money. And we had about 36% of the human folding proteins predicted. And they took 2 databases, PDB and UniProt, and now we have 100% overnight. I think they're going to win the Nobel Prize for this. And this is the thing as well. So, you know, it is AI. If they do win the Nobel Prize, they're not going to give it to the AI. They're not going to give it to the bots. They're going to give it to the team that worked on it. So there's always going to be humans involved. But how do we get this happening for everything? And I think that's what the next 10 years should look like. So going back to content, this is open access publications. I just tweeted about the fact that when I was trying to get on the EduRoam here, and I don't have EduRoam access, so it's similar to, I'm also not at an academic institution, you know, so I don't have access to any content legally. And then but we've gone past 50% open access publications. So 10 years from now, if we go back 10 years, we were at 40% open access publications. Now we're over 50%. So the shift has happened last year. So I imagine by 2031, it'll be as close to 100% as we're ever going to get, because there's always things that you can't make. You know, the European Commission has a great line about as open as possible, as closed as necessary. I truly believe that that's important. But so what's going to happen with all of the content? We've seen a lot of this recently with why open content is important. There's been a rise of preprints. I also think there's this whole open but good is, I feel a bit of I'm skirting the issue here, because you can say, what's data available upon reasonable request is something I don't like, but all academic publishing should be fast but good, and good is a hard to quantify thing, right? But this is actually a prediction paper from 2018 saying that fake news and distrust of science could lead to global epidemics. I don't think they led to global epidemics, but I wouldn't say they helped. And then if you look at the data side of things, again, 10 years ago, no data being published. And now if you look at specifically a very recent event, you know, how false science created a COVID miracle drug, it's really cool because you can see the reasons below. So they're looking at the data sets here, and they're saying the numbers are unlikely to occur naturally. And we've definitely had this change from, I used to get people asking me, well, if people make the data available, how do you know they're not just making the data up? And it's like, well, how do you know they're not making the data up now? You can't see the data, so how do you know that any of it's real? You know, if you had an election, if Trump decided that he wasn't going to release the results of the election, just said, I won, people have asked questions of it, right? So it has to be the same in academia. And so things like that, numbers unlikely to occur naturally, means that people are faking the data, and you can check for it, you can scan for it using data forensics, and percentages calculated incorrectly. People just made mistakes, it happens, right? But you can fix them, it's self-correcting. So if we're looking at these things, then if we go back to Jim's Gray slide, I think we need to be thinking about, we've got peer review for fast but good publishing. It's kind of fast and good, and understanding how much you want to move the dial, because you could publish a preprint, but then you don't know that it's good. You publish an academic paper, it could take 3 years to get published. So somewhere in the middle is probably the sweet spot. But with data, I feel the problem is that we've gone from just going from a situation where there's no stuff on the internet to some stuff on the internet, to, okay, what's that? Is it good? And I can dig in a little bit more about what I think good means. And I think we are moving to a post-mandate world. The reason why open access has gone past 50% is because funders started saying that you have to publish open access. The NIH in January 2023, which is what, 15 months away, the biggest funder of medical research in the planet, is mandating that when you publish your papers, you have to publish your data. So we're going to get a huge amount of data coming out then. And where do research institutions and libraries fit in all of this? I think they fit in the middle, because we heard about this already. It's this midsection of technology, people, and culture. Those are the three things that need to be moving in order to move things forward in the data space. So if you look at the data publishing culture, we do this State of Open Data survey every year. The next one's coming out in December. So it's good to gauge what's happening with academics. And so 8,500 respondents. Of course, it's a response to a data survey, so you could argue it's slightly skewed by people who have an interest in the data space. But one of the most remarkable changes we've seen, there's also some really cool stuff in this, like for this year coming out. I've seen the data already, and it used to be that people didn't want to share the data because they didn't want to get scooped. And now it's more, I don't want to share the data in case I've got some mistakes in there and I look like an idiot. But at least we've moved past the idea of getting scooped, because people reusing your data is a good thing. But this shows that researchers were asked, should the funders make data sharing a requirement? And then should there be penalties if they don't make their data available? And you think that, you know, it's my data. No, you can't tell me what to do with my data. It has actually moved on to 2/3 will say, yes, we should be making our data available, and yes, we should be punishing those who don't. Because it has to be everybody or nobody. If I'm publishing my data and I fear that one of my peers is going to reuse that and not share their data, then they have an unfair advantage in the space. And so if you just make everybody make it available, then you move the needle somewhat. And the other thing that's happening in the culture is this idea, the reason I made my data available to have more impact is actually proven to be true. And so if you make your data available in a repository and link it from the paper, you get 25% more citations. And this is on 500,000 papers, so it's quite high-end numbers. So if you're talking to researchers, tell them it's good for their career. In terms of the people in the technology, I think, again, a problem with legacy publishers, not new publishers, is that their systems are legacy too. So it's very hard to add new things in. It's very hard to get 5 megabyte files into your system if it's built for sharing PDFs. And so we did this pilot with the National Institute of Health where we said, you have a repository and we'll get people, there's a lot of librarians who now work at Figshare, to check those files and just try and, this idea of findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable data, just try and focus on the findable and accessible. Because reusable is a tough one, you know. Are we going to run the code on huge experiments and things like this? It's a big cost to it. But can we just make them findable and accessible? Because, this is a great graph, by the way. If you have people trying to improve metadata, there's more metadata, this shows you. So if you have somebody checking the metadata and saying, we need more metadata, you get more metadata. That's nothing. But you actually find it has more impact as well, because one of the big problems, and one of the problems I think about with Figshare is there is a free version of Figshare where you can publish data, but nobody checks it. And that's a problem for a few reasons, which I didn't think about was going to be a problem 10 years ago. So it's good that it is a problem. But it's also a good way to incentivize people. If you describe your data well, people will find it, people will build on top of it, you'll have more impact. And so if you go to the free Figshare and do a search on dataset, there's a lot of datasets called dataset, right? So I'm not sure that even Google's AI bots can take this and be like, okay, we'll find some knowledge in there. It's not useless, by the way, and a lot of people say it's point, because if it's linked to from a paper and the paper describes the context of it and you're reading the paper and you say, oh, here's the data, then you can build on top of it. It is useful, but it doesn't solve that grand humanity challenge of moving further faster. And so when I think about how do we get from here to here, then that's where the people come in. And so I think I'm about on time. If we think about where universities and repositories and archives fit in, you've got the mixture of, like here today, you have a repository, so you can send researchers to that repository, and I would always send researchers to that repository over the free Figshare, because there's people to help you. There's people to explain new concepts to you. And another thing we find from the state of open data is if you hold the hand of the researcher once, they'll do it again and again and again, but they're scared because they don't understand what's a CC BY license. You know, I don't know what that means, so I'm just going to stop here. Whereas if you can walk them through it and explain it to them once, they'll do it again and again and again. And so we have questions, should we just stop the free Figshare? But then I still think there's a value add, and then you have people who don't have the fortune to be at good schools with people and library budgets and things like this, and who don't have the tech or the people. So I think the culture is changing. I think the incentive structure is changing. I think the funders are forcing people through. And then the people in the tech, you have it here, right? And so this is a 10-year-old picture of bags we used to have. So we've believed that librarians are badass for a decade now. And then if I think about the researchers, what I would tell them, it's this fast but good but open. And at the moment, have you seen those things where you have three dials, and if you move one, the other two move? Because you can't have all of them. You can't have fast and good and free, for example, right? You can, but you can't have it uniformly. And so if we're thinking about what the future is, and Jim Gray's original idea about why we're doing this, or what is pushing the needle in academia, the speed at which any given scientific discipline advances will depend on how well its researchers collaborate with one another. I think that the point he was missing there was if you remove the researchers from that, you remove the people not responding to the email saying you can't have my data because it's my data, and you say, no, everything's openly available and it's checked in some way, then it's good for the researcher's career, more impact, more reuse, and it's good for humanity. I know that's a bit profound, but it's moving things forward. So I think if anybody ever asks why they should be doing this as a researcher, I think you can get them on many levels with this diagram here. And so I'm happy to answer any questions, or I'm happy to hand over to the next set of things. But thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you. Are there any comments or questions? Sorry.
Got a beer down there.
Yeah. Any comments or questions or anything in specific?
Nobody disagrees. I've got my points across.
I've got a question actually. Effectively, you have two options: just to put your data in and to publish it. Do you see a trend towards more publishing?
Yeah. So with the idea that there's a few of these hybrid data publications. So most of the big publishers have a data publishing journal, and that's to because the incentive structures still aren't there. I can say that you'll have more impact. So when I say you get 25% more citations, that's 25% more citations to the paper. No matter, regardless of if the data has an impact on its own, the paper has more citations. But if you look at going back to the culture, I still don't think we're at the point where people don't think that if they get published in Nature twice, they're set for life, right? And you have lots of different principles on how you can, the DORA, Declaration of Open Research, that says we're not going to judge people on impact factors and things like this. But the reality is that isn't true. You have to play the game with where we are now. And so I think in 10 years, we might be at the point where funders say if you publish some code that's cited more than your papers, you should get promoted on that. Because there's lots of areas where nurses, people like that, don't publish papers, right? So how do you prove your impact? But today, the publication is king. And the publication will always be king because it's the context. The publication is not going to go away. The journal article is not going to go away. But in my logic, I'd say that a data set can be as good as a data set that's well described can be as good as a well-described data set in a paper form. But academics have been taught different things, as I was, and I think that's going to be the slow change for academics to move towards this. It doesn't matter where you publish. Well.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? Okay, that's good. Thank you, Mark. All right. Oh, sorry. I'll move to the next part of our program. Here. Yeah. Okay. So we have a game, and I told you before that you can win on top of the cup. You can win a sock. This is a little bit on testing how good you remember from the other events. And if you didn't join the events, then you're going to have to guess, of course. So this is, I've seen several versions of this. It's a hats on, hats off, or stand up or sit down. I think I don't want to get every one of you stand up and sit down because you're comfy, but you can use a Figshare cup, and you can either lift the cup up or down. I was going to use or if you have a glass, you can also use the glass, but I don't know if everyone has it, so we can do it with the Figshare cup. So yeah, so this is the example question, and I gave you the answer before. So this is the example question. Let's see how you do. How many sessions did we have this October in the DataFest campaign? So cop down if it's 8, and cop up if it was 10 events. Very good. It was 10. So whoever didn't lift it didn't win. Very good. Perfect. Thank you for that. All right. So I'm going to go so that we have 10 questions, and it's each of the events because we had 10 events. Have you learned? The first event we had was the opening of the ceremony, and we had Christophe Perignon as a key speaker telling us about replicability and how good or bad are we doing on that. And so he actually tells us that there's a replication crisis. And he's giving us this from a publication from Nature 2018 that says actually only a very small percentage of 203 publications were able to reproduce the research of the publication, right? So the question I'm asking you is to give me the percentage of the turquoise, which is the all code runs. So the publication was actually replicated. This circle has dark red, which means none of the publications were able to be reproduced. The red, one or more missing, so they were not able to reproduce, but they had some sort of a code or something. The slight light pink is all code, but it doesn't run. And the turquoise is, this is the percentage we were able to reproduce. So cop down, if you think is 14%, and cop up, if you think is 19%. What do you think? So everyone thinks it's 14. Very good. You all win. Nice. Very good. So that was 14 in that, indeed. The second event we had was with Antonio Schettino, that is here. Here, sorry. I meant he was sitting somewhere else. He told us about the career benefits on open data, which is also something that Mark just mentioned. And he said that your publication citation increases. This is the total percentage of citation. So how much can your citation increase when you share your data openly? Cops down if you think it's 15%, and cops up if you think it's up to 40%. Okay. This is peer pressure because everyone. Very good. You're all doing very well. 40%, up to 40%. Perfect. All right. So the third session we had was prepping your data. So there was 2 researchers telling us on they prep their data and they submit the data to the Figshare, our EUR Data Repository, or EDR. So how long did it take Dr. Jan Stoop to upload his research data to the EUR Data Repository, or EDR? Cops down if it was 2 minutes, cops up if it was 30 minutes. Okay, some of you lose because it took him not even 2 minutes. That's what he said. Not even 2 minutes to take it, upload it to the data repository. All right. So the next session we had was with Nienke de Groot, which is also joining us here, also from the organizing team of this DataFest campaign. And she talked about sharing data in the EDR. So how do you deposit your data? So the question is your data publicly available in the click of the publish button of the EUR Data Repository? Cops down if it's yes, and cops up if it's no. Very good. It's not publicly available straight away because there's a curation process. So actually, Nienke will be revising your data before it gets published. Yeah, very good. So the next event we had the journal's perspectives on data policies. This is a bit of a long question, so bear with me. In 2019, there was a publication where 24 journals listed in the Tilburg Top 100 ranking. 58 of them had a data availability policy. How many of these 58 had a mandatory policy? This means that you had to publish your data. They were mandatory to publish your data. So from these 58, cops down if you think 20 of them had a mandatory policy, or cops up if it was 34 of them. Okay, we have a divided group. 34. Very good. All right. We then had a myth-busting session where we tackled the top 5 concerns that we had for researchers. So back in April, we ran an open science survey. We actually asked the researchers what are your concerns on open data, on open access, on pre-publication, pre-archiving, everything. But this was focused on open data. So I have 2 questions for this one, because that was my session, so I really like it a lot. No. No, I'm joking. All of these sessions were half mine as well. No. OK, so the question is, was the concern there could be issues related to intellectual property the top 3rd concern for the Erasmus School of Economics and the Rotterdam School of Management researchers? A, so cups down if it's true, cups up if this is false. Some of you are just guessing, but very good. This is false, actually. This was the 4th concern. Doesn't matter. Very good. And a second question of this session, the concern there could be issues related to privacy was top 1 concern for ESE and RSM researchers. What was the percentage of researchers that had this concern? So cups down if you think it's 55%, and cups up if you think it's 67%. Was actually 55. All right, we're getting there. Our next session was Gabriele Polacci. He's the ERIM Open Science Award winner from last year. And he told us about the open equals better heuristic in management research. So he said, open science will lead to truer evidence, which will lead to what? Better management or more impactful management? So cups down if you think it's better, and cups up if you think it's more impactful. Half and half. It was actually more impactful. Very good. Very good. All right. We're almost there. I think it was the 9th session, or the 8th session, was Judith, which is also here. She showed us how to connect ORCID with the EDR, and you can show your records automatically. But she also showed us when you are adding already existing data sets that you have in the EDR, and you want to add them to ORCID, you need to use an extra tool. So cups down if this extra tool is DataCite, and cups up if this extra tool is Almetric. So what tool do you need to use to add existing data sets from the EDR to your ORCID? This is DataCite. All right. Very good. Yeah, this is, I think, the last question we have. So the last, before this event, we had a session with Gerrit, Roel van der Berg, Rajeshi, and Lotte. And she was telling, they all told us about how open data can connect you to society and the impact that you can have in society. But one of the things that we need to discuss, and of course this has been touched already, when you're thinking about open doors on open data, protecting the data you collect from your participants should be the researcher's priority. Cups down if this was true, and cups up if this was false from the talks. Okay, very good. Everyone got that one right. Perfect. I think, okay, that's for the game. I actually don't know who won because you all did very well. So we can all have talks. Thank you so much. All right, I'm just going to wrap up. We have a few minutes. Oh, this is not my phone. I just realized this is your phone. Very much. Sorry. I was like, I don't have the photo of my daughter. That's very weird. All right. So we had 10 events. This was a great campaign. In your cups, you have a QR code on the top of the code. This will lead you to the collection of the October DataFest that we have on Figshare, where we actually have all the presentations from these events. So please go to the QR code, share it, use it if you need the presentations. The idea here is to give you something like as an example of what we are doing, but for you to do it yourself as well. But if you want to learn more, you can also get the presentations and anything that you need. And the second thing we have as an output, let's say we made together with Rob Grimm and Paul Platzman, both of them here, we have a database catalog for ERIM and RSM researchers that we compiled. We cleaned it up a little bit, and we have now in our ERIM websites ready for you to use. So this is something we did. We have a little bit more than 100 databases, so it's a lot, but it's very nice. So some of it is publicly freely open. Some of it has restrictions, but we have a column that has what restrictions you need to do if you needed to have some restrictions. And before that, just want to give thank you. So these are all the presenters and the organizing team, but I'll give the microphone to Matthias for the last very, very short words. Thank you so much.
Tempting to stress the importance of a data repository, because when we did a short survey 5 years ago, it turned out that maybe 20% of the ERIM researchers were willing to share their data after their research with their colleague next door. And now we have over 100 data sets in this repository, and I think just over half of it is published as a data set, which is terrific. So I think you set a great example with this DataFest. It's something we're going to promote also in other faculties. But my role here is to say a very big thank you to the data team. And I want to mention especially two persons, which is you, Liz, because you were the driving force behind this DataFest. And I also want to mention Nienke. So please come forward. Because you are our data repository manager, you contributed to these sessions a lot. So thank you so much. And well, you set a great example, and I really hope that when we present the results at the researchers meeting in 2 weeks, every faculty say, yes, this is what we want. We want to create more societal impact, and yes, we're going to use the data repository. And you gave a huge contribution to that, so thank you a lot. And well, we really deserve the drink, and you deserve a bunch of flowers for it.
Yeah.
So this one is for you.
Thank you. All right, I think we're free, so you can have drinks, and there's we will have a bottle as well. I think we need to order it at the bar still, but so I will see you around. Thank you so much.
That's a very nice gesture.
It's really incredible.